Good morning, KBOI. This is Dylan Stalker, as we are every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. here on KBOI for the Great Idaho Show. You know the Great Idaho Show, what is it about? I mean, just put the brackets around the subject, Idaho. My goal is to introduce you all to any single person or situation that's happening in Idaho that I feel is great. I hope you do too. Today we have a wonderful guest that I'll introduce you to here in just a moment. But before we do, we don't want to forget our sponsors, Old Arms of Idaho. Old Arms of Idaho are your collectible firearms, Western, and military specialists. They do this all day, every day. If you think that you have a curio, a relic, or something of interest that's related to firearms, Western or military, give Old Arms of Idaho a call. Look them up, oldarmsofidaho.com. They will help you figure out what you have. Think of it like the Antique Roadshow, something like that. They're the experts. They do this every day. Today is a wonderful day because Idaho has a very rich history in firearms. We're talking about the West. The West was one with those things. And we have a great man here with us today, Paul Snider of Lewis and Clark Traders Gunshows. Paul Snider has been promoting gun shows in Idaho for decades. He's been one of the most reliable. They've been all over the state. You can about catch a gun show on any given weekend somewhere in Idaho, and it's been happening for how long, Paul?
Since 1980, 45 years.
45 years of promoting gun shows in Idaho. I love Idaho. I love classic firearms. I love gun shows. I'm so thankful to be able to talk to you today, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure being here.
So I'm trying to get better at asking this first question, and I've failed to do it on most of my first interviews. I got it on the last one. But, Paul, what do you love about Idaho, good sir?
I think what I love about Idaho, and my memory hatched in Idaho. I was actually born and raised in, I wasn't raised, but I was born in Michigan, and we ended up in Idaho, but my memory hatched in, it would have been in Salmon, Idaho, and I was 4 years old. And so I remember everything since then. And I love Idaho because of her freedom. I love Idaho because of her outdoors. I love to hunt in Idaho. I love to fish in Idaho. Idaho has some of the most recreational properties. It's got everything. If you're jet boating, you're floating a river, or you're going antelope hunting, Idaho has it all.
Man, you can do anything recreational.
It doesn't get better than that.
Man, and you've been doing this for quite some time.
Yep.
Wow. Well, going back to it, geez, you've lived in the places in Idaho. You lived in Boise. Back when were you living in Boise?
I was in Boise, and I actually got married when I lived in Boise. I moved to Boise, it would have been 1955, and I lived there for 10 years and had some great experiences here. I had a pretty good job. I worked for Crown Zellerback. I was paid $1.87 an hour.
The big money.
But that was union scale. Driving a delivery truck. So
yeah.
Things have changed since then. And but Idaho, in this particular area here, I've probably fished in every one of these rivers around here, not once, but maybe a dozen times.
Yeah.
Reservoirs here, and I'm hunted all through this area. I love Idaho.
And you went to high school in Garden Valley, Idaho.
Garden Valley, Idaho. Yeah.
That's a place after my own heart there.
But that was 1955 when I graduated.
Yeah.
And I tell people I graduated 7th in my class, which I did. But I neglect to tell people that there was only 7 in the class.
You were 7th
but I was still in the top 7.
Yeah.
Any way you want to look at it.
It's an accomplishment.
But there was 29 people in the high school then, for the whole high school in Garden Valley in 1955.
Oh, man. So funny little story. You've got to tell it. We are in the Paul J. Snider building here in Boise, Idaho. Paul J. Snider, KBOI, one of the greatest talk radio people of ever, right here in Boise, Idaho. And we have Paul Snider here. You got a story about Mr. Snider,
well,
don't you?
This goes back a long time. This has to go back into it would have been probably 57, 58, somewhere in there. Maybe early 60s. I got a telephone call one time from a radio celebrity by the name of Paul Snider, and he said, are you Paul Snider? And I said, yes, I am. He said, the only reason I'm calling you, he said, do you have a bunch of hounds? I said, I sure do. And he said, the reason I'm calling you is because I get a telephone call every once in a while in the middle of the night telling me to shut my dogs up.
That goes back a little bit.
Paul J. Snider had a good laugh about that, and I had a good laugh about that. But I did have a few hounds, and I did have to, I only had 2 or 3 of them, but I did have to get up in the middle of the night and shut them up once in a while.
You know, you got the great Paul J. Snider, and we've got Paul Snider here of Lewis and Clark Traders. We're talking about Idaho history, ladies and gentlemen. We've got somebody here with us that's been here, done that, lived it, fished it, hunted it, and ran one of the greatest businesses that I could wish I could be associated to in Lewis and Clark Traders. How did Lewis and Clark Traders begin?
Well, this would have been in 1980 when we started, but it actually started a couple years before that, when I would come down and do a gun show here in Boise, Idaho. The Idaho people were in business then, and I'd go to their show and just rent a table and set up, and enjoyed it so much. Lewiston did not have a show there.
Yeah.
And so I went to the fairgrounds and talked to the manager there, and I said, I want to put a gun show on here. And his name was Jerry Storr. And Jerry said, I'd love that. He said, if you'll do that, I'll let you have the building for $500, which was a giveaway then, even then.
Yeah.
And I figured if I could rent 100 tables, I could break even. Now, I was a salesman by this time, so I had a pretty good experience about selling stuff, including myself. And I said, Jerry, how many tables do you have? I didn't own any. He said, I have 300. And so I went to every gun show in the Northwest there for about 4 months. I sold 300 tables. And at that time, I quit selling them because I had no more tables. And so a week before the show on Monday, I went to see Jerry with my schematic, and I said, this is how I want it laid out. He looked at that, and he said, how many tables you sell? And I said, 300. He said, I only own 100.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, but you told me 300.
Yes.
And he said, yes, I remember telling you that. And Paul, I'm going to take care of you. Jerry, he knew everybody in town. He managed that fair building for years. And he was a Shriner. And he knew everybody. And Jerry went and borrowed tables from everybody in Lewiston, Idaho, from the Armory to the Shriners. And he got together 300 tables.
It's a different world.
And we had a great show.
It's a different world, Paul. I don't think you would get that today.
Oh, I would.
They'd say, I'm sorry, and you're doomed, and that's it.
He's the only guy that I know would ever do that.
That is such a great... I can only imagine your heart dropping through the bottom of your pants when he told you that.
Yeah.
You collected the money. These people are counting on it. And Lewiston is such a great spot. You got the state line there. You got Spokane, Washington close. You got Post Falls close.
Lewiston, Idaho is the best kept secret. I shouldn't even announce this.
Everybody be quiet.
When I moved there, the population of Lewiston, 1965, the population of Lewiston is 28,000. Today, it is 32,000.
It hasn't changed, but you know what I love about it is climate-wise, it's an easy place to live.
Oh, it is. It is. It's a great place. We have 2 major rivers right there. We have the Clearwater, and we have the Snake River right there, and up the river we have the Salmon River. So we have one of the greatest recreational areas there is.
When you read the book, The River of No Return, every single one of those trips talks about finishing up in Lewiston, Idaho.
Yeah, that's right.
As they come out of the Salmon and they finish up through the Snake and all that integration there.
And a great story, and I probably don't have time to tell you this one, is the movie The River of No Return.
Okay, and we got about a minute and a half here on this segment.
I'll make this real quick.
Yeah.
Robert Mitchum starred in it, and Marilyn Monroe.
Yep.
Marilyn Monroe can't run through rivers, rapids, and all kinds of stuff. So they hired a girl that was born and raised on the Salmon River.
Absolutely.
And she was, if you went to Grangeville, went straight south, you'd go down on the river, and there's an old rancher down there. They called him Haywire Wilson. He had 3 blondes, and they were beautiful girls. One of them was hired to do the second for Marilyn Monroe. And when the premiere showing of The River No Return was shown, it was shown at Mackey Bar, Idaho, on the Salmon River in her honor.
We're in one of the greatest parts
That's a great
in
Idaho
the West.
story.
That is a great Idaho story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that, because this is the Great Idaho Show.
Yeah.
This is, I'm Dylan Stalker. I'm your 3.5 generation Idahoan. This is the Great Idaho Show. We're speaking to Paul Snider of Lewis and Clark Traders Gun Shows. I'm a super fan. Anybody I bring in here, I'm a super fan of, because I know these folks. I've done business with these folks, and I've been going to Lewis and Clark Traders Gun Shows for near 20 years now. I've had such a good experience, Paul. Before we go into this next segment, we've got Lewis and Clark Traders and Old Arms of Idaho. That's our sponsor. Old Arms of Idaho, your firearms, Western, and military collectible specialists. We'll be right back here this morning on KBOI. Thanks for listening. Good morning. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Great Idaho Show. We're sitting here with Paul Snider of Lewis and Clark Traders Gun Show, and we could talk just about the gun show and everything firearms related in Idaho. We have so much rich history of firearms in Idaho. We have Spear with Vernon Spear, and we have CCI, and gosh, Paul, we have Jack O'Connor, a very famous gun writer. We have John Taffin, another famous gun writer who's sadly no longer with us. We have Paul Snider right here. He's been doing gun show stuff forever here in Idaho. Welcome back to this segment, Paul. But, let's talk about the gun show a little bit. What does it take for you to put that thing on?
Oh, it's a lot bigger job than most people even think of. Finding the venues, securing the venues, the place we're going to hold them. And that's a major job, and that's one job I do every year. And that actually takes me about 3 months and working up a schedule.
Yeah.
And so we have that. We have to put everything together. We have to advertise for it. We have to buy the insurance, and that's a major deal. That's a major check I write once a year for the insurance on those shows. I mean,
and you write a good major check to the old KBOI studio here, because I hear you just promoting
I do that.
About every weekend that you come in here, right?
Yeah, we buy advertising from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the future, I'll make sure at least we have one on your program.
Well, I would just put it up there because I wouldn't mind promoting you. It's not about the money for me, Paul. It's about Idaho.
Yeah. But anyway, you're putting the thing together and maintaining it. And then, of course, when the show starts, lots of people don't like their locations, so we got all kinds of people problems to get everything organized, trying to keep everybody happy. Yeah. That's a major job. If they're not happy, then I'm not happy. So we got problems there. We put that thing together, and then the show starts. And actually, once the show gets rolling, I get to relax. And then people ask me now, and I'm getting up in years, they say, "What do you do at gun shows, Paul?" I said, "I get paid to talk." So all my friends show up, and I'm going to tell you guys that's listening, you ever come to one of my shows, and down here we have it at the Idaho Center there in Nampa. Yep. And so you come, and you ask for me, and it'd be a pleasure to have you sit down, and we'll just visit about whatever you want to visit about. I'm 88 years old, so I've been there and done that.
And you've got plenty of time to talk, and you have plenty of experience doing it.
Amen. Enjoy
about Idaho guns, all the good stuff. I love it. I've been lucky enough to participate as a vendor at the Lewis and Clark Trader Gun Shows when you were down at the fairgrounds and now at the Idaho Center, and it's very consistent. And I'm telling y'all, if you're just listening this morning, you're going to hear the ad right here on KBOI radio. I already know your listeners because you're listening to me right now. You're going to hear it. It's not just about the guns. That's the word that gets everybody. There's Western art there. There's oftentimes Native American artifacts there. There's so much more than just firearms. It's something to do. It's a great experience.
We tell everybody that our shows are where good friends meet.
Yeah.
And they do. It's a social deal. Most of the people that do our shows are repeaters, and they just come because their friends are there
Yeah.
and visit with everybody. It isn't all about buying and selling. Just sit down and talk. And I have been in Boise for 44 years, Boise area.
Yeah, doing this wonderful thing that you're doing. And the gun shows, it's a cultural thing, really. It's something that if you're just moved here, you've had gun shows where you used to live, and maybe they aren't there anymore for some generally political reason. But I'll tell you what, I've been lucky enough to get to know many of the participants in the Lewis and Clark Trader gun shows. And we're talking about characters. And when I use the word character, you've heard me say that before. These are just some of the neatest, interesting, salt of the earth, good people you ever met.
Okay, now, listen close. I believe in the 80-20 rule in everything.
Okay.
You know? So, you go to a home and garden show, for example.
Yep.
20% of the people that go to that show can buy anything they want. 80%, once they pay admission and a hot dog, they don't have any more money. You go to a gun show, and that's reversed. 80% of them people can buy anything they want to buy.
Sure.
The other thing about people that come to gun shows, 80% of them are voters, and they support our state.
Well, let's just celebrate that right here, right now, you know?
Yeah, amen.
I try to remember people that they're moving here, or remind people, excuse me, we're all moving here for a reason. And I'll tell you what, the core culture of Idaho is based on honor, honesty, and just doing the right thing generally, where you could get away with a handshake. And people like the honesty, the nice, courteous is a word that I think of. And you're going to get generally that experience right at the Lewis and Clark Trader Gun Show. And I love that about it.
Yeah, you'll meet some of the finest people in the world.
Yeah, good.
And they're all true Idahoans. They're living here for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all moving here for a reason.
And they all love their Winchesters.
And they all love their Winchesters. I'm a Marlin man myself, thank you very much. But I'm not trying to compete with your brother. But
Marlin's okay. Yeah, talk to my brother.
Yeah, I'll talk to your brother about that one. You know, but Marlin's a pretty good stuff, Paul.
Oh,
don't think less of me because I'm a Marlin man.
Yeah.
But, 40 plus years of doing gun shows, we love the firearms and the history. Yeah. You have one of the most wonderful collections of things. And once a year, I'm going to throw a plug for other things that I love that you have supported and I personally appreciate. Yeah. Once a year, you support the Gem State Arms Collectors in setting up a display tables for what would you call that? How do you describe that?
Well, it's just they once a year, first weekend in April, they have their displays.
Yep.
The only downside of that deal is they always want me to put up a display. Now, I can't win the trophies because I buy the trophies.
Well, because you have all the trophy guns. I mean, you got everything nobody else has.
And so they talk me into it every year. And I'll tell you what, once I get set up, though, I love it because I get to talk constantly for 2 days.
Well, you get to show some of the neatest things. This last time that we were here, you had set up an entire table of things that had Native American significance in firearms.
That's a big show. I think I had 5 tables of it. Yeah,
that was amazing. I felt very lucky to see some of that stuff.
Yeah, I have some very, very nice Indian stuff. In the position I'm in, I get an opportunity to buy some of the nicest stuff.
Yeah.
And I have some great stuff with history. I own Fighting Joe Hooker's Henry rifle.
That is so
cool. And Fighting Joe was a general in the Civil War.
Yeah.
And he is the man that would actually hire ladies to come in for his troops. And one day he's sitting there, another officer is in camp, when a wagon full of girls came in, and the officer turned to another and said, "What's this?" And the other one responded, "Oh, those are hookers. That is in history book. That's where the slang word hooker
Oh
started.
my goodness
right
gracious.
there. And I own Fighting Joe Hooker's Henry rifle. That's one I own.
You should give it to me. That would be so nice. I could say I had a piece of that history too.
I'll show it to you.
Okay, well, I guess I get to look at it.
But
I tried.
I have another great gun by Two Guns Whitecap. Now, who is Two Guns Whitecap? He's an Indian, Blackfoot Indian. And you have no idea, nobody else does, but you've seen his portrait more than any Indian ever. Two Guns Whitecap had the reservation when the Great Northern Railroad wanted to create Glacier Park.
Oh, wow.
And it belonged to the Indians, is on the Indian reservation. So they had to renegotiate to take that, and they paid him something. But one thing they did, they put his portrait on the Buffalo nickel.
Oh,
That's
wow.
Two Guns Whitecap.
You've got one of a firearm
I own
from
that
Two
gun.
Guns
I bought it
Whitecap.
actually directly from the family. And on the butt plates inscribed, Two Guns to Two Guns Whitecap, great chief of the Blackfoot Nation, presented to him by the Great Northern Railroad. I own that gun.
That is pretty amazing because the Blackfoot tribe in Idaho itself is a very long history too.
Here's we need to correct this.
Please.
Blackfoot tribe is in Idaho.
Yes.
Blackfeet is in Montana.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Idaho, Montana,
And
it's all
Blackfeet,
Lonesome Dove here, isn't it?
Blackfoot tribe is kind of a smaller tribe. The Blackfeet is a major tribe.
Yeah. That is, I think we love it for the history, Paul. It's like there's the gun, but then there's the history behind what it is.
I love Old West history. When I have spare times, I just read Old West novels.
I love U.S. or Idaho Territory mark stuff, right?
And we have some of the greatest stories. If you haven't read the book, Avenging an Innkeeper, about the guy, can't think of his name now, should know it, but where he was robbed coming from Montana gold mines and killed and murdered. And the innkeeper, a guy named, can't think of his name either, but he had a hotel.
In a safe place here, my friend.
Luna House. He owned a Luna House hotel in Lewiston, Idaho. And he chased those murders clear to California.
Yeah.
And brought them back in shackles in a stagecoach, tried them in Lewiston, Idaho, and hung them at the Hill Beachy Park. That's the innkeeper's name. The Packer's name was Lloyd Magruder. One of the greatest stories. It's a shame that John Ford didn't do a movie with that with Gary Cooper or John Wayne.
Well, we're getting into this next segment here. They're running out of ideas in Hollywood. So if you're in Hollywood and you're listening, Paul Snider just gave you a great idea based right out of Lewiston, Idaho. This is Dylan Stogger, your 3.5 Generation Idahoan for the Great Idaho Show, sitting here with Paul Snider of Lewis and Clark Traders. We will be right back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back this beautiful morning on KBOI, 670 AM, 93.1 FM. This is Dylan Stalker, your 3.5 Generation Idahoan. Hey, reminder out there, Old Arms of Idaho, they are your collectible firearms Western and military specialists. It's about history. We're sitting here with a man of history, a man that's collected history, participated in Idaho history and similar forms of the great reference to firearms and Western and all of that stuff. Western. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Again, we're talking with Paul Snider. Paul Snider is the owner of the Lewis and Clark Traders Gun Shows. It's been doing gun shows in Idaho and the local area for over 40 years, since 1980. And I'm so thankful that you had a moment to come in and just share, Paul. The floor is yours, sir. Give us something about Idaho, something about the connection of Paul. Paul's, you've visited with Jack O'Connor before.
Oh, Jack O'Connor was he a personal friend? He was close to it.
Yeah.
I've been in his house numerous times. I went and visited him. But let me tell you about the first visit.
Yeah, and let's remind everybody, not everybody knows, but Jack O'Connor is one of the most prolific gun writers in all of American history. He was part of Outdoor Life magazine, and he is part of the Smithsonian at this point. So
Jack O'Connor was a household name around our place. My dad loved him.
Yeah.
My dad was a minister of the gospel before he passed away. Well, actually, this is kind of interesting. We won't get into it, but my father actually drowned while trying to save his dog's life. But anyway, he loved Jack O'Connor. I tell everybody he thinks Jack O'Connor was a preacher because everything Jack O'Connor said or did was the pure gospel.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So anyway.
So if he told you buy the gun, that was the gospel you needed to go with.
Amen. So I moved to Lewis in 1965. I wasn't there but a couple of weeks, and I thought, I'm going to go meet Jack O'Connor.
Yeah.
So I drive down there on Prospect Avenue where he lived and parked my car and walked up there, puffed out my chest, and knocked on the door. And when Jack O'Connor opened that door, I was humiliated, and I wish I wasn't there. I could tell the last person he wanted to see was somebody like me.
Yeah.
I introduced myself, and he looked at me. I could read his face. But then he said to me, he said, "Oh, come on in. I'll give you the tour." And he took me up that flight of stairs to his office upstairs. Big Bengal tiger hide on the wall. Went into his office, big office. There's his desk and his typewriter. And he was surrounded by guns. All the way around that room was a firearm hanging on the wall. I mean, not hanging on, but sitting on the floor leaning against the wall. And then he said to me, we'll go to the trophy room. His trophy room was an extension of his garage outside. We went to his trophy room. Now, I looked comfortable. I read every one of his articles. So I look at a picture and I said, "Oh, that's old Phil Johnson when he was hunting over on the Ruby Range."
Yeah.
He looked at me and, he said, "Well, that's Johnny Johns. That's a good picture of Johnny Johns." He looked at me again and I said, "That's old Frank Galata when he was up on the Prophet River country." And the third time he looked at me and said, "I've got a real fan here, don't I?" I said, "Yes, you do."
You've been reading
I'll
him
say
forever.
one more thing about Jack O'Connor and our friendship. Was I a personal friend? No, I don't think so, but maybe close to it. The other thing is, did he ever invite me on a hunting trip? No, he never did do that. But 1970, I just returned from a stone sheep hunt in British Columbia, and I killed a tremendous ram. So one of the first things I did, take it down to Jack O'Connor. And he looked that thing over, and we talked a little bit about it. And I was getting ready to leave. He said, "Paul, you got any pictures? You bring your pictures down here." He said, "I'm going to write your story."
Oh, wow.
Well, how many people did Jack O'Connor tell that to? So.
Man, that's an honor, you know? I mean, this is Idaho history. And again, Idaho has a lot of vibrant history of firearms. I'm just throwing one out there in the middle of the air, but did you ever engage with Mr. Spear, with Vernon?
Not so much with Vernon. I knew Vernon quite well.
Yeah.
But his son, Ray Spear.
Okay.
That when I got up there, Ray was running most of it. And then he had a son-in-law that worked there named Forrest Luthi. And I was selling paper products for a living then.
Oh, you lived in Lewiston selling paper products. Yeah. I can't imagine.
And I sold Spear Bullet all their packaging.
Oh, really?
100% of it.
No kidding.
Along with Cascade cartridge when old Dick Spear owned it.
Yeah.
And up until I quit the paper industry, I sold them probably 90% of their package, which they were my best customer.
I love so for ladies and gentlemen who are listening, I'm talking to an insider on the firearm stuff here. Vernon Spear, the Spear Projectile Company, one of the most prolific creator of projectiles for many, many decades, and they're still a wonderful name today that ended up combining with CCI of a primer company, and it's all right here in Idaho. And you've been hanging out with these fellers from their start.
Now both of these are owned by a foreign company. Just recently bought them out, which is sad because they make more ammunition, right? And then they actually own Federal, they actually own Remington. They make more ammunition than any person in the nation, and I'm not sure that was the smartest thing to do. And there was a group of legislators that tried to prevent that sale, but
yeah, it just gets centralized, but the core of it is there right here in Idaho.
Yeah.
You know what I love about going up to Lewiston? I always go to the pawn shops. And if you're in Lewiston, Post Falls, or anywhere near that, you're going to get an opportunity to potentially buy one of the many Spear bullet boards that exist. And I collect them, and there's probably about 100 or more of the dang things that you can find and hang on the wall. Yeah. Did you ever get a couple of those?
I did. Let me tell you, I was in the inside track. I knew the inside people. I had every board they ever made. Plus, I had about 5 original paintings that they hired the artists to paint those pictures. I had the originals.
Oh, you have the originals, because they'll do one for Union Pacific
about 5 or 6 of them. What I have right now is the Stagecoach.
Okay, that's a great one. Yeah,
so I wouldn't sell that. And I have the original painting. I have the original painting of the Imanaha, where the big ram's heads and the stern wheelers in the background.
Okay.
The big ram's head on the sand there at the confluence of the Salmon River and the Snake River. That's a big picture. That's about 48 inches wide, and I have it. And but it's kind of on loan.
Which one would you sell?
I sold.
No, the one that you have now. I'm trying to buy something from you, Paul. I mean, is there a chance in Helena, Montana?
No,
probably not, but I got to ask.
I hate to say it was Dylan, but today I don't need any money.
I know you don't. I can't help but ask. I mean, goodness gracious.
The big one of the Imanaha was kind of a goofy thing. A guy actually gave it to me.
Yeah.
And that's the big one. That's 48 inches long by about 30 inches. And it has a beautiful frame. And he said, I want it. And I said, well, I'll be glad to pay you. And he said, no. He said, I ain't going to take any money for it. Take it. I said to him, well, I'll tell you what. When I die, I'll see if you're still alive, Jack will ask you. That's my boy.
Yeah.
If you want it back. He said, yeah, have Jack call me. So I can't sell that one. I might have to give it back.
I love you and Jack.
Go to heaven, well, that guy might get it. If he's still alive, he's about my age.
Yeah. You and Jack have been at it. You know, you have a family business essentially, and that's what I love about it too. And, you know, it's just it's hard to describe unless you go experience it, but you'll see we're talking about professionalism. We're talking about a well-run organization, and we're talking about the opportunity to go and connect to things that you just don't get to see every day. And if you claim yourself to be a Western military, a firearms enthusiast, if you haven't been to a Lewis and Clark Traders gun show, well, you best be going when you hear it on any one of the radio stations, especially KBOI radio, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ever forget that. That's why we advertise. They advertise here. But yeah, I'm so glad you took a moment to share, Paul.
Now, we haven't touched on cowboy stuff.
Well, we should.
Yeah.
We've got hit me with cowboy stuff. Talk about some of the fun you've had with that.
I was one of the first collectors of bits and spurs and cowboy paraphernalia.
Okay.
And so I got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so my bit and spur collection, there's been 3 books written about them.
Oh, my goodness.
And then when I got ready to sell it, and I really wasn't looking to sell it, one guy came. I had 27 prison-made horsehair hitch bridles. These are tremendous pieces.
Sure.
And they were all made in prisons, local prisons. You would get to the point you could look at one of them and tell what prison it came from. And I had some of these were mostly museum quality bridles. And one guy showed up, and this has been 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago now, showed up and spent 3 days at my house. And he said he wrote me a check for over $700,000 and took it all.
For horsehair, ladies and gentlemen, it's got some Western significance. We collect sheriff's badges, and we have a lot of Native American reservation police badges.
Yeah,
and those are some of my favorite little things.
I have some of those to this day. I have one true Texas Ranger badge.
Oh, goodness.
Now, it's a true one. I bought one at an auction in Canada one time and showed it to a friend of mine, and I paid $400 for it at the auction. And my friend went and got a catalog and said, "Here's your. You can buy all you want for $40."
Oh my goodness! Right? Like they weren't making
It's hard to
fakes
find
out
a
there.
real one, and this is a real one. And I think I paid him $800, but it's a long story. They won't bore you with it, but it's a good one. And I have the guy, the sheriff, the ranger's name, and that had his name was Whispering Joe Mayfield. And why did they call him Whispering? Because he took a knife blade in his throat box and cut it. So he spoke with a whisper.
Yeah.
And I have that. And there's one guy that's kind of famous that wants to buy it when I'm done with it. And he won't get it until I die, but he's quite a bit younger than I am. But his name's on it, and his name is Mark Furman. I'm sure you remember Mark Furman with the O.J. Simpson.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Yes, of course, right? That was O.J. Simpson. I was lucky enough to be working on the Jack Hershey Ranch in the Big Hole, Montana, just like Yellowstone when that whole O.J. Simpson thing was going down, living in a cowboy shack, having to heat our water with a fireplace in the summertime, having a lazy Susan cookhouse, and the only entertainment we had was the O.J. Simpson trial of the time. And now we find out
that big entertainment too.
Now Paul is associated to everything all over the country, and including some of the biggest things we've got. We've got a few seconds
here.
here.
OJ wants my badge, and he'll probably get it.
Mr. Furman.
I have his name on it.
Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? He was like, this is a long story, and I won't bore you with it, but it's a great one. I think Paul might want to come back for another episode here. We're going to finish up this segment here at the Great Idaho Show. We're visiting with Paul Snider. Paul Snider of Lewis and Clark Traders Gun Shows. You'll hear it on the radio. You'll hear it all over wherever you live, all over Idaho, Lewiston, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, Twin Falls, Filer, Pocatello, Idaho Falls. You'll get to go, and you should. We're going to finish up right now, and we'll be right back here in just a few moments, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. KBOI, 670 AM, 93.1 FM. This is Dylan Stalker. I am your 3.5 generation Idahoan. I've been in Idaho my whole life. I've driven there. I've tried to see it. I even went there when I didn't want to, but I've certainly participated in many great things here in Idaho. You know, you can go and hear all of our episodes of The Great Idaho Show at thegreatidahoshow.com. They're out every single week. They're going to keep on coming. Why? Because there's so much great to do and great things happening here in Idaho. Today, again, we're visiting with Paul Snider of Lewis and Clark Traders Gun Show. Gunshows, Idaho, Western, some of the greatest stories. We have many impactful people. And Paul, let me just open this up for you. We've got a segment. You are a storyteller. I love your stories. What is one of your favorite Idaho stories?
Oh, my land. There's so many of them. Where could I start? The favorite will take too long, but I'm going to make it condense it really down. This is factual.
This is like sweetened condensed milk right here.
There was a guy by the name of Fred Reed that claimed to be a Texas Ranger, and he took across, he left Texas, going through Oklahoma territory with his uncle, got into a gunfight with a U.S. Marshal. The Marshal's heel stuck out behind his feet, and the tree. The Marshal's behind a tree.
Okay, yeah.
His heels, and these Reed boys were crack shots, and they shot his heels out from him. Of course, the guy couldn't stand anymore, and they killed him. They ended up in Lewiston, Idaho, and at Lewiston, Idaho, they split. Uncle went to Seattle, and Fred Reed went to Pierce, Idaho. Pierce opened up a butcher shop there, and he very profitable because he'd steal the cattle and butcher them and then sell the meat. He got friendly with the girl that owned the hotel. Her name was Mrs. Warren. She was married, and her husband lived out at the ranch. Now, I've got to condense this thing because it's so great, and it would take an hour to tell this story. Deadshot Reed got in trouble with the law, and he was ambushed he was acquitted for stealing cattle. The rancher ambushed him and shot him in the arm. He had to go into hiding. When it healed up, he had to get out. The sheriff was after him. He had to leave town. So when he left, he had to go see Mrs. Warren. She owned a hotel, and they were quite friendly with each other. They was enjoying each other's company. And he wrote her a note and said he had to leave, and he had to get out of town, and him leaving. But he said, by the way, I'm taking your 13-year-old daughter with me.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
This story is so great.
Yeah.
And he went to Lapway, told everybody they were going to Florida. Mr. Warren.
Lapway, just south of Lewiston, right?
Yeah. And Mrs. Warren, or Mr. Warren, chased him to Lapway. They went to Florida. He went to Florida after him, trying to find him. Developed malaria and died looking for his daughter.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, I'm going to have to stop this deal, but they ended up in the Salmon River country. If you ever go to the South Fork of the Salmon River country, there's a place on the map called Reed Bar.
I've traveled right through it, floated right by
Reed Bar is where they settled down and raised their kids, and Deadshot destroyed a lot of guys, just shot them for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And one of his grandsons told me, I said, how many men did you guys, your grandpa killed? And he said, Grandpa told me he killed 11, not counting minorities. And I don't know how many he shot in the
Oh, my goodness. It's called the River of No Return for a reason.
Living out of Emmett, Idaho. And they called him, and some of you old timers will remember that, they called him Deadshot Reed. That's a pretty good Idaho story.
That's Idaho's story.
That's
for
a good
sure.
one.
I mean, the Salmon River, I didn't get to spend as much pay. I'm a Payette River kid. You know, I lived in the Sawtooth area, Lowman, and always been hanging around with the Payette and all that stuff. I was lucky enough to float the last 75 miles of the Salmon River before it confluences into the Snake River. You know, and you've been growing up doing this pretty much your whole life, Paul. And it's hard for a lot of people to imagine when they're just getting here how much rich history. And if you don't get out there and see it with your own eyes, you know, go float the river with somebody. There's plenty of outfitters out there.
Yeah, them old homesteads is on those rivers. They have every one of them old homesteads have a story.
Yeah, they're going back. Lots of years, you know.
Yeah.
And they were floating down in wood boats back in the day. You know, there's no rubber rafts back then.
Well, the first ones down the Big Salmon was a raft with a guy named Gulick. He had built a raft in Salmon, Idaho, float down the river. And this is kind of a good little Idaho story. Thunder Mountain was the good gold strike on Big Creek that flows in the Middle Creek. And Big Creek, the Thunder Mountain mine. Then this mine slid in and formed a lake called Roosevelt Lake. You've seen historic pictures with the roofs of these houses in this lake. Well, there was a guy named Zane Grey that wrote that book, Thunder Mountain, and if you haven't read it, you need it. It's a good novel. It's about Idaho. He wrote it on location on Thunder Mountain there. Yeah. And he hired a guy named Elmer Keith to pack him in.
Nobody knows who Elmer Keith is.
Now,
he's only one of the most famous gun people in America.
And this is kind of interesting. A couple years later, Zane Grey wrote Elmer a note and said, I'd like to have you organize a hunting trip down the Big Salmon. They would hire Gulick to build a raft and take him down. And Elmer Keith wrote back and said, yes, he could organize that trip and he'd be glad to it. But before we do anything, the $1,500 check you gave me bounced, and I want you to make that right before I do it.
Let's get this straight, okay, ladies and gentlemen. While we're helping invent the 44 Magnum cartridge with Smith & Wesson, we want to keep our business straight when we're talking about what we're doing here in Idaho. Just by chance, did you ever engage with Elmer throughout all the time?
I never have. No, I never have.
You know, he was salmon. He was from Salmon.
He was from Salmon, yeah.
Did you ever engage with Roy Goodman?
No. Yeah, Idaho had some great writers.
There was some great names for sure.
Drewblood was from Nampa.
Yeah.
And a guy named Clyde Orman was from Burley, Idaho. Clyde, back in the 50s, wrote lots of articles. outdoor art because his name's all. But he was a school teacher, so he's probably a pretty good writer.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm lucky. I have a home in Boise I've lived like 3 blocks away from John Taffin.
Yeah.
And, John's been writing Taffin's Test in American Handgunners magazine for forever, and his own books and Six Guns and all the different books that he's written. And I did this not a gun show, excuse me. Once a year for a while, I would do this yard sale and basically do a gun show in my yard and put that I had all this stuff. And there comes John driving by, getting out of his car, and he's getting along in age and hard to get out of the car. I'll never forget the first time he got out of the car and his wife was with him and he wanted to look out what I had in my yard. And his wife had said something and he's all, "You keep it down, woman." And he said something like that, just like a character, but it was out of fun. It was good hearted, right? It made it sound like he's a rough old guy, but he was just having fun. We're just lucky for just living here, Thank you for sharing your stories with us, Paul.
Oh, yeah. Well,
you've got the gun show running, and they're still running.
Yeah, it's still running.
We're taking a little break here locally. You're still running the gun shows out in Pocatello, Lewiston.
Yeah.
What do you got coming up this summer?
Yeah, well, this summer, summer shows are slow because too much competition for people's time. They have gardens, they have vacations, they got so many other things to do. So we try to slow down in the summertime. We actually have one coming up the end of the month in Post Falls.
It's one of the great
ones. The one the end of actually end of June in Post Falls, and then we have one in July in Coeur d'Alene. Then we're off until September.
Well, so for all of y'all that have been enthusiasts and you're not sure or whatever, I mean, just the drive from this local area up to Post Falls is just the drive itself is worth every second. To see Idaho, you go through Grainesville, Lewiston, Lapwai, and up there. And, Post Falls is one of the most active gun shows in all of your repertoire.
It's probably the best attended gun show that we have right now.
Yeah. And you've got a border town.
Don't come to Post Falls unless you want to walk sideways to get through the crowd.
Yeah, that's a good one, though. You guys have been doing it for so gosh darn long. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes people tune in the middle of all this and they're like, who are these 2 people talking on the radio? Who you're listening to right now, folks, is Paul Snider, Lewis and Clark Traders. I've been going to Lewis and Clark Traders gun shows for over 20 years, half of your 40 plus years experience. And it's been a great time every time. The gun shows are under attack, ladies and gentlemen, and there's something special. They're culturally what happened in America, and we've got about 30 seconds here, or do we have what? Maybe we've got about 10 seconds left. Who's the time manager here? Paul, thank you. This is Dylan Stalker, the Great Idaho Show. Thanks for being here with us today, my friend.
Thank you, and it's been a real pleasure of mine, and thank you for letting me share some of my stories.
I really appreciate you, Paul. You all have a great day. Thank you very much.